The moon hung low in the ink, black sky casting an eerie glow over the dense forest. A crisp autumn chill permeated the air, sending shivers down the spine of anyone unlucky enough to be outside. It was a night like no other, a night when the predators of the darkness emerged from their hidden lairs. Sarah had always been fascinated by the supernatural and the unexplained. That fateful night, she decided to venture into the forest alone, armed only with a dim flashlight and her insatiable curiosity. She had heard rumors of a predator that roamed these woods, a creature that was neither animal nor human, but something far more sinister. As Sarah delved deeper into the forest, the trees closed in around her, creating a claustrophobic canopy that swallowed the feeble light of her flashlight. The only sound was the haunting whistle of the wind through the trees, like the mournful cry of a lost soul. She pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, Sarah heard a rustling in the underbrush nearby. She froze, her flashlight trembling in her trembling hand. The rustling grew louder and closer, and then, emerging from the shadows, was a pair of glowing eyes. They shone with an otherworldly light, like two cold stars in the darkness. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the creature revealed itself. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. It had the body of a human, but its skin was a pallid gray, stretched tight over its emaciated frame. Its limbs were long and spindly, ending in sharp, bony fingers that reached out towards her. Its face was a grotesque mockery of a human face, with sunken, hollow eyes and a gaping maw, filled with rows of needle-like teeth. The creature moved towards Sarah with a slow, deliberate grace, its eyes locked onto hers. She could hear its labored, rasping breaths, like the sound of a dying animal. Terror surged through her veins as she realized she was face to face with a predator she had only heard whispers of. In a panic, Sarah turned and ran, her footsteps crashing through the underbrush. But the creature pursued her relentlessly, its grotesque form moving with a supernatural speed. Every time she glanced over her shoulder, those glowing eyes were closer, and that twisted face was twisted into a malevolent grin. As Sarah sprinted through the forest, she stumbled and fell, her flashlight clattering to the ground. In the pitch darkness, she could hear the creature closing in, its ragged breathing growing louder and more menacing with every ounce of strength she had left. Sarah crawled under a fallen tree and hid, praying that the predator would pass her by. Minutes stretched into hours as Sarah huddled in her hiding place, her heart pounding in her chest. The forest was silent, as if it held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Then she heard it again, the unmistakable sound of the creature's approach. It was right above her, its terrible presence so close she could almost feel its icy breath on her skin. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature was gone. Sarah waited, trembling with fear, but there was nothing but silence. She dared to peek out from her hiding spot, and the forest was empty, the eerie glow of the moon, the only thing illuminating the night. With trembling hands, Sarah picked up her flashlight and made her way out of the forest. She never spoke of the encounter to anyone, for fear of being branded insane. But the memory of those glowing eyes and that twisted face haunted her nightmares for the rest of her life. To this day, the predator of the night remains a mystery, a terrifying presence lurking in the darkness of the forest, waiting for its next victim to stumble upon its malevolent realm. And those who dare to venture into the haunted woods are forever warned, beware the silent stalker, for it may be lurking just beyond the edge of your flashlight's feeble beam. It was a moonless night in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness. The forest stood in eerie silence, the only sounds being the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant hoots of owls. Jason, an experienced woodsman, had embarked on a solo camping trip to escape the monotony of city life. Little did he know that this night would thrust him into a chilling encounter with an unseen predator. As the darkness deepened, Jason sat by his campfire, its flickering flames the only source of comfort in the wilderness. The solitude was exhilarating, but it came with an undertone of unease. Stories of nocturnal predators whispered among the locals, tales of a creature that preyed on those who dared venture into the woods after sundown. Jason had always brushed them off as old wives' tales, but tonight he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. With the fire dwindling, Jason reluctantly decided to retire to his tent. He zipped up the flap, cocooning himself in darkness. His flashlight and hunting knife were within arm's reach, just in case. Despite the exhaustion from his day's hike, sleep eluded him. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as though nature itself sensed something amiss. It was then that Jason heard it. A soft, rhythmic scraping sound coming from outside his tent. His heart quickened as he strained to listen. The noise was intermittent, like claws or talons scraping against the bark of a nearby tree. Panic surged through him as he realized it wasn't a raccoon or a squirrel. It was something much larger, summoning his courage. Jason unzipped the tent flap slightly, just enough to peek outside. His flashlight's beam pierced the darkness, revealing the source of the sound. He gasped in terror as the light illuminated a monstrous silhouette, hunched over a tree with grotesque, elongated limbs and sharp, shadowed features. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. A twisted, nightmarish creature. The predator was engrossed in its eerie task, seemingly unaware of Jason's presence. Its movements were deliberate, each scrape of its talons echoing through the forest. Jason's mind raced, his instincts telling him to remain hidden, to hope the creature would move on. But curiosity and fear propelled him to study the creature more closely. As he observed, he noticed that the creature's body seemed to be made of living shadow, shifting and undulating like ink spilled on water. Its eyes were piercing orbs of malevolence, reflecting the dim light like pools of darkness. It had no discernible mouth, yet its presence exuded an aura of dread that seemed to penetrate to Jason's very soul. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the creature's unnatural activities. It was as if it were drawing power from the very essence of the forest. He knew he had to leave, to escape this horrifying encounter. But fear had paralyzed him, leaving him trapped in the tent, unable to move. Then, in an instant, the creature ceased its scraping and turned its head towards the tent. The intensity of its gaze sent a chill down Jason's spine. He knew that he had been seen and that he was the prey. With adrenaline surging through his veins, he made a split-second decision to make a run for it. Jason burst out of the tent, his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon. He sprinted blindly through the woods, crashing through underbrush and dodging trees. The predator was right behind him, its shadowy form gliding effortlessly through the trees, gaining on him with each passing moment. It was a harrowing chase through the labyrinthine forest, the creature's otherworldly presence close enough for Jason to feel its icy breath on his neck. But just as he felt his strength wane and despair overtake him, he burst into a small clearing, bathed in the silver glow of the moon. The creature faltered at the edge of the clearing, recoiling from the moonlight as if it were a physical barrier, gasping for breath. Jason watched in awe as the creature retreated, its silhouette gradually fading into the darkness of the forest. It seemed that the moon's pure light held a power over it, a power that had saved him from an unthinkable fate. With trembling hands, Jason retraced his steps back to his campsite. He packed his belongings hastily, his mind racing with the incomprehensible encounter he had just survived. As he left the wilderness behind, he couldn't help but wonder about the enigmatic predator that had stalked him that night. A creature born from the darkest corners of the forest. A creature that defied all logic and reason. A creature he would never forget. In the heart of a small, forgotten town, a looming, decrepit mansion cast a chilling shadow over its surroundings. Locals whispered tales of the mansion's cursed history, warning all who would listen to stay far away, especially after sunset. However, there was one person, a thrill-seeker named Emily, who couldn't resist the lure of the abandoned mansion's mysteries. Emily, known for her curiosity and daring spirit, decided to spend a night inside the notorious mansion. Armed with a flickering lantern and an old journal filled with stories of the mansion's dark past, she ventured into the unknown one moonless night. The heavy wooden door creaked open, revealing a grand foyer shrouded in cobwebs and the remnants of forgotten opulence. As Emily explored deeper into the mansion, the atmosphere grew more oppressive, and an unshakable sense of foreboding settled over her. The mansion seemed to breathe with a sinister life of its own. Whispers of long-dead residents echoed through the dusty halls, their anguished voices telling tales of tragedy and despair. Emily's lantern cast eerie shadows on the cracked and peeling wallpaper as she ascended a grand, winding staircase. The whispers grew louder, like an unholy chorus of the damned. Her heart raced as she reached the upper floor, and she felt as though unseen eyes watched her every move. Then, it began. The haunting whispers became more pronounced, forming words that sent shivers down Emily's spine. "Get out," they hissed. "You shouldn't be here." But Emily, undeterred by fear, pressed on, determined to uncover the mansion's secrets. She entered a dimly lit room, its windows boarded up with rotting wood. The whispers grew deafening, as if the very walls of the room were alive with voices. In the flickering light of her lantern, Emily saw something that chilled her to the bone. A shadowy figure in the corner, its features obscured by darkness, as Emily's trembling hand raised her lantern to reveal the intruder. A blood-curdling scream pierced the air. The figure rushed towards her with terrifying speed, its face hidden by a tattered moth-eaten hood. Its movements were unnatural, like that of a predator, closing in on its prey. Panicking, Emily turned and fled, her lantern casting a feeble glow in her frantic escape. The relentless pursuit continued, the hooded figure closing the distance with each passing moment. The whispers grew more insistent, urging Emily to leave, to escape before it was too late. Emily burst into another room, slamming the door shut behind her. She desperately searched for a place to hide as the ominous presence pounded on the door, its chilling breath seeping through the cracks. In the dim light, Emily noticed an old wardrobe in the corner of the room. She had no choice but to hide inside. As the door burst open, with a deafening crash, Emily held her breath, praying that she would remain unnoticed. The room filled with the hooded figure's raspy, agonizing laughter as it searched the room, inching closer to the wardrobe with each passing second. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the hooded figure reached for the wardrobe's handle. It creaked open, revealing her hiding place. The room was bathed in darkness, and the figure hesitated as though it could sense her presence. In that moment, Emily couldn't bear the suspense any longer. With a sudden burst of courage, she flung open the wardrobe door and rushed out, her lantern held high. The hooded figure recoiled from the light, its shadowy form dissipating like smoke in the wind. The whispers grew fainter until they faded entirely, leaving Emily in the eerie silence of the abandoned mansion. As dawn broke, and the first rays of sunlight spilled into the mansion's decaying halls, Emily knew she had escaped the clutches of the sinister presence that had haunted her nightmarish encounter. She left the mansion behind, vowing never to return, and to this day, she can't forget the haunting whispers that echoed through its cursed walls. A malevolent predator born from the darkest depths of the abandoned mansion's history. A creature that defied explanation and reason. A creature that defied explanation and reason still lurks in the shadows, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim to enter its domain. In a remote, forgotten corner of a decaying industrial town, an abandoned mill stood as a grim testament to a bygone era. Its rusted skeletal frame loomed menacingly against the moonlit sky. Nobody in the town dared to venture near it after dark, for the locals believed that something malevolent had taken residence within its crumbling walls. On one fateful night, Mark, an adventurous teenager known for his fearlessness, decided to test the veracity of the stories that swirled around the abandoned mill. Armed with only a dim flashlight and a sense of invincibility, he embarked on a mission to spend a night inside the dilapidated structure. As Mark crept closer to the looming edifice, the weight of the eerie silence pressed upon him. The wind whistled through broken windows like mournful spirits, and the moon cast long, unsettling shadows that danced upon the decaying brick walls. The entrance to the mill was a yawning black maw, inviting yet terrifying. Once inside, the air grew thick with a musty, acrid smell, a suffocating mixture of rust, decay, and abandonment. Mark's flashlight illuminated a nightmarish tableau. Twisted metal girders, shattered windows, and rusted machinery lay strewn about in grotesque disarray. Each step he took seemed to echo through the cavernous space like a death knell. Mark ventured deeper into the mill, his flashlight beam quivering in his trembling hand. He had heard tales of a predator lurking within, a predator lurking within, a predator that defied description. They called it the Shadow Beast, skeptical but undaunted. He pressed on. As the minutes turned into hours, Mark's unease grew. He felt as though unseen eyes were watching his every move, and an oppressive presence seemed to envelop him. The once dim light of his flashlight began to flicker ominously, casting strange, shifting shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. Then, the scraping sound began, a faint, guttural noise that sent shivers down Mark's spine. It echoed through the mill, emanating from an unknown source. Mark's instincts screamed at him to flee, but his curiosity bound him in place, his mind concocting rational explanations for the eerie phenomenon. Suddenly, a series of loud thuds echoed through the mill, each one closer than the last. Mark spun around, his flashlight beam landing on a grotesque silhouette that sent terror coursing through his veins. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A creature that seemed to be made of living darkness, its form amorphous and ever shifting. The Shadow Beast unfurled from the darkness, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. Its appendages were long and sinuous, ending in sharp talon, like claws that scraped against the crumbling concrete floor. Mark's flashlight trembled, its dim light revealing the creature's horrifying visage. An elongated, twisted face with hollow, abyssal eyes and a maw filled with needle-like teeth. Paralyzed with fear, Mark could do nothing but watch as the creature advanced with an unnatural, fluid grace. It seemed to glide through the air, drawing ever closer. He could hear its raspy, breathless hiss, a sound that chilled him to the core in a desperate bid for survival. Mark turned and ran, his footsteps echoing through the mill as he fled from the nightmarish entity. The creature pursued him relentlessly, its inhuman speed defying all reason. Panic surged through Mark's veins as he sprinted blindly through the labyrinthine passages of the mill, desperately seeking an escape. Just when it seemed that the shadow beast would close in on him, Mark burst through a decaying door and stumbled out into the moonlit night. Gasping for breath, he watched as the creature halted at the threshold, its unnatural form recoiling from the pure light of the moon. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Mark realized that he had escaped the clutches of the unseen terror that had haunted the abandoned mill. He would never forget the night he encountered the Shadow Beast, a predator born from the darkest recesses of the human imagination, a creature that defied all attempts at explanation. To this day, the abandoned mill stands as a warning to those who would dare to seek out the unknown, a place where darkness reigns and the Shadow Beast may still be lurking, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim to venture inside its lair. In the remote wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, nestled deep within a dense forest, stood a weathered cabin. It had been abandoned for years, its decaying walls serving as a canvas for graffiti and its ominous reputation keeping the locals at bay. But on a moonlit night, Jake, a fearless thrill seeker with a taste for the macabre, decided to spend a night inside, unaware of the chilling encounter that awaited him. With nothing more than a dim lantern and a backpack of supplies, Jake ventured into the heart of the forest, guided by the eerie glow of the moon. The cabin's silhouette emerged through the trees, a dark sentinel against the night sky. The air was thick with a foreboding silence, and a sense of unease settled upon Jake like a heavy shroud. As he stepped over the threshold and into the cabin, the darkness within was oppressive. The floor creaked beneath his boots, and the musty scent of neglect filled the air. The cabin was a relic of the past, a place that time had forgotten, and it exuded an aura of malevolence that sent shivers down Jake's spine. Undeterred, Jake set up his lantern, casting a feeble circle of light amidst the darkness. The cabin's dilapidated interior revealed a scene of abandonment, rotting furniture, peeling wallpaper, and forgotten relics of a life long gone. His imagination ran wild with stories of the cabin's sordid past, tales of madness and despair that had plagued its previous inhabitants. As the hours passed and the moon reached its zenith, Jake's lantern began to flicker ominously. The walls seemed to close in around him, and the cabin itself appeared to breathe, as if it harbored a sinister presence of its own. He dismissed the growing unease as mere nerves, determined to confront his fear head-on. It was then that the first sound echoed through the cabin, a soft, ghostly whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Jake strained to listen, his heart pounding in his chest as the whispering grew louder and more distinct. It was as though the cabin itself was trying to communicate, its voice filled with sorrow and longing. "Leave," it murmured, the word tinged with an otherworldly urgency. "You don't belong here." But Jake, drawn deeper into the cabin's mysteries, was undeterred. He pressed on, his lantern casting an eerie glow upon the walls that seemed to come alive with spectral shadows. As he moved through the cabin's labyrinthine interior, Jake noticed a peculiar pattern emerging. A series of strange symbols etched into the wood and painted on the walls. They were ancient and mysterious, and he couldn't help but feel that they held the key to the cabin's secrets. But as he studied them, the symbols seemed to shift and change, as though they were alive. Suddenly, a bone-chilling sound shattered the silence, the creaking of the cabin's floorboards, as if someone or something was approaching. Jake's heart raced as he realized he was not alone. The whispering grew more frantic, a cacophony of voices begging him to flee. Turning toward the source of the noise, Jake saw them. Shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, their forms indistinct and unsettling. They moved with a spectral grace, their movements defying the laws of nature. Their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, and they seemed to be reaching out to him, their fingers elongated and skeletal. Panicked, Jake bolted for the cabin's door, his lantern swinging wildly. The figures pursued him, their ghostly forms gliding through the air with an unnatural swiftness. The cabin itself seemed to conspire against him, its hallways shifting and twisting like a labyrinth designed to confound and ensnare. With each passing moment, the moonlight became his only ally, casting an ethereal radiance that seemed to repel the pursuing figures. Jake pushed himself to the limits of his endurance, bursting out of the cabin and into the moonlit forest, his heart pounding in his chest. As he stumbled through the wilderness, gasping for breath, he realized that he had escaped the clutches of the unseen menace that had haunted the cabin. The whispering voices had faded, and the spectral figures had vanished into the night. To this day, Jake can't forget the night he encountered the moonlit menace, the predator that lurked within the decaying cabin's walls, a malevolent force born from the darkest depths of the forest, a force that defied explanation and reason, a force that still waits in the shadows, ready to ensnare any who dare to enter its realm.